So Declan, you're first on the stage. Please introduce yourself. And we've got Samantha. Samantha has a digital twin called Vinci, and she travels around the world doing performances with mocap suits. So you can all check her out online. Very forward-thinking lady. Great. I'll pass it to you.
Everyone good? Yes, alright. Nice one. So, hello and welcome to our discussion on how generative AI could disrupt the music industry. My name is Declan McGlynn, and I'm a music technology journalist and consultant for the likes of Rolling Stone, DJ Mike, Google, the BBC, Dazed, resident advisor, and many more. I also run my own Substack newsletter called Future Filters. Let's check it out. Today we're going to talk about the many ways in which generative AI can disrupt the music industry, from what's already occurred, what's happening right now, and what might play out over the next months and years. AI is one of the most disruptive technologies that any field has experienced in recent decades, and creative industries are ripe for opportunity but also exploitation. We're going to get into that a little bit more over the next 35 minutes, but first let's introduce our esteemed guests. Do you want to start with Samantha and just give a little bit of background on what you do?
Hello, can everyone hear me? Just thumbs up. Awesome. Hi, I'm Samantha Tauber. My company is called Vinci, but I have this character called Vinci as well. I've been rocking the free world since 2017 with this character. She is a fictional, super sentient AI superheroine from the future intergalactic, and she became the centerpiece creatively for my music project. So what do I do that's cool? I produce all my own music, and I make all my own content in Unreal Game Engine, and I wanted to bring this character to life, so it started with me using like stock animation, like teaching myself, and then I started getting into motion capture. And I think it's kind of ironic here we're talking about generative AI music, but I went down the deep dive of a fictional, super sentient AI superheroine character to create all my content. That's me.
Nice. Follow that.
Yeah, wow, thanks. My name is McNeill. I run the UK office of an organisation called Song Division. We have spent 20 years using music as an engagement tool at events. So we go to your event, if you're a big bank or pharmaceutical, I bring some musicians, we teach you to write an original song, and the staff write a song about their company as a team building experience. So very much on the human side of this conversation, but I'm actually incredibly excited about where AI will sit in that world of music, and I'm also an original singer-songwriter as well.
Nice.
Hi, I'm Alex Cole. I'm a partner at Russell's in the industry department now. We're a law firm with clients predominantly in the entertainment industry and a lot of clients in music in particular.
Nice one. So I wanted to start by taking the temperature of your individual takes on where we are. There's a lot of conflicted opinion often about AI at the moment in music. Could you start by telling us what you're most excited about and what you're most concerned about when it comes to AI and generative AI in the music industry? Just us.
Yeah, I mean, it's like all forms of technology. My general position is I'm a pragmatic optimist, so I'm not seeing it all with rose-colored lenses, even though my Vinci character has rose-colored lenses. But at the same time, I see the opportunities and the threats. The opportunities are, create new soundscapes, a positive, benign, symbiotic partner that you could have never envisaged. The threats are, will this replace music artists and musicians and make us redundant? ? That's the main threat. It's like, but my temperature is my whole positioning in life is existential joy over existential dread, because what's the point in being fearful?
Do you think it will replace? Let's just get straight into it. Yes,
you just get to the crux of it right now.
The replacement narrative is obviously the main
Yes
one.
and no. It just really depends. Are you creating, background music, or are you really establishing a genuine human connection? This is my personal opinion, but I feel like any form of technology, it's a grey area.
I agree pretty much with that. I think what's really exciting is the fact that, disruption's a big word. It doesn't need to be that drastic, in my opinion. I think, especially music, we've probably been the closest thing to AI as far as art forms gone for probably at least the last 20 years, as far as programs that can already create tracks for you. So I want to build a house track in Ableton, it knows the structure that you want. It can be dictated by your instructions. So that's kind of actually been happening for quite a while with programs like Logic and Ableton. So it's not actually that scary on the music side of things. Lyric writing, things with OpenAI and ChatGPT, that concerns me a little bit more, but I think as we all ride this wave, the technology will be there, similar to blockchain, like the last one panelist talked about, where there'll be much more proof of where those lyrics have come from, what's going on, the journey of that song, so that people can make the choice for themselves. Do I want to enjoy this music, knowing that no human was really involved? But it's also about consumer choice as well, which is exciting as well for me, I think. G'day, mate.
I think I'm elaborating on a theme people discussed already, but I think from a personal perspective, for me, there are some very obvious use cases in terms of quite functional music. There's an announcement Universal Music made recently that they're doing a deal with a company called Endel, which is doing music for sleep and things like that. There's production music libraries in the music industry who commission music to make it easily and cheaply available for syncing, so putting it in films and adverts and TV shows. Those are all used to music where people don't have a kind of huge emotional connection to music, and I think generative AI has a place, I think, to disrupt all of those sort of subsets of the industry. To what extent it will kind of reach into areas where people have much more emotional connection with a particular artist or touches on fandom. I don't claim to know the answer to that, but it's an interesting place to see where it goes.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into sync and functional music a bit later on, but as you mentioned, AI in music isn't a new thing. Spotify's been using it for a long time to create record recommendation algorithms and how we consume the music. And one of the interesting points about that is there's been a push to basically you're rewarded for sounding like other famous artists because that's how the similarity algorithms work. Therefore, it has already become a homogenized nature to the sound of like popular music, because although the way those algorithms work, everyone wants to get playlisted, everybody wants to be heard, so they all create this homogenization. But with AI, the issue is now if it's being trained on existing music, that's just going to result in further homogenization, right?
Yeah, it could only amplify it. I mean, if it's already like that, this cultural homogenization that's happening already on streaming platforms and Web 2 with algorithmic filtration bubbles, then you can only imagine the potential for that. But as I said, pragmatic optimist, so there's ways around this.
So how do you feel as an artist? Like, how do you feel about that in terms of people being able to press a button and fast track to success in inverted commas, or what people might perceive as success? Using this technology that scrapes, different music libraries to kind of bypass the hard work and the instrument learning process, the production process, the branding, the marketing, etc. Is that even possible? Am I being too nihilistic here?
No, and I think this is Alex has a few things to say about this from a legal perspective, but in terms of the fact that the AI can kind of scrape from that, just ethically that feels wrong, but I know different jurisdictions, Japan had an interesting stance where they're like, yeah, that's cool, that's okay, and it caused a bit of a ripple effect around the world going, is that okay to train on this material? Obviously I'm biased because I'm an artist, but at the same time I do see the benefits of collaborating. I see the AI as a sparring partner. I don't know, you know what I mean? And maybe it's this opportunity to level up. Maybe it's an opportunity to take a step back and look at the signal to noise ratio and be like, okay, well this will only amplify the noise if I feed into this beast, right? Or can I turn it into a positive outcome and use it as a sparring partner and really go to the depths of what makes a great song and human connection, creativity to level up? I mean, it's our choice at the end of the day, isn't it?
Alex, I think you should chat to this more than me, but all I would say is that since whenever music started being easily recordable, I'm talking about 60s, 50s, it's gotten easier and cheaper to do it. So it's not just sort of dropped off the cliff in the last 12 months or whenever this happened, it's gotten much easier to create songs with less talent or musical ability, with less production, with less gear, not needing to host you. So that's been happening anyway. But what needs to happen is the value of what's being created needs to be aligned with the value what it costs to create. And by that I mean the cost of the music degree, the cost of the person's time, whatever that might be, the cost of the studio gear, the software. I want to see transparency around how much effort did it take to create this song and how much cost was involved, and that should be reflected in the price point.
Just quickly on that before we move to the legal side, how could that transparency be displayed in the current ecosystem?
I think that's really exciting. There's going to be streaming services that will only put music on there that's created by musicians who create everything by scratch. There'll be music labels who will only sign artists, and then you'll be able to curate your own journey and say, oh, I'm subscribed to this label because that's their deal, and they only release music on whatever vinyl, whatever it is. And people will love that, and then there'll be a niche for that.
Yeah. Do you think it might be like a badge of honour? Well, to an extent.
I think so. Yeah, I think a lot of musicians are like, I did my degree and I studied for years and then I'm angry and like, hey, it's all good. But what needs to happen is people need to say, well, I'm going to pay for that service, but I'm going to know that that costs thousands for that guy to create that song or that album, and so I'm going to pay accordingly for it. That's my thoughts.
Yeah. Alex, it'd be good to hear the legal perspective here because, as Sam touched on, there's different jurisdictions with different legal kind of approaches to this. So we get to hear your take on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so we're really talking about copyright, I guess, is kind of key area here. And the difficulty with copyright is it's territorial. So there's some international conventions which mean that there's certain overlap between different territories have signed up to those, but different territories are taking different approaches in terms of both the sort of what we're calling the input question. So do you need permission to train your model on some copyright works in that territory, and also the output question, which is when the generative AI technology creates an output, to what extent does that attract copyright at all, and if so, who owns it? I think in terms of where we see, because there's a lot of kind of legal ruminating about these things in a kind of abstract and unhelpful way. In terms of practically where we see this going, I think we're going to see some litigation in the short term around, I think, labels and publishers looking to enforce their rights, and effectively, if they suspect that their copyright material is being used to train models without their permission, there'll be litigation on that. And then there'll be litigation on the artists and performer side, the people who think that their personal characteristics of their voice, for example, are being used either at the input stage to train the model, or that the output exhibits those characteristics. So, the fake Drake is a good example. What does Drake want to do about that? Does he want to shut that down? And then I think one common misconception about new areas of technology and law is that because technology is new and the applications of the technology are new, the old laws don't apply. That's not the case. And I think where this is going to shake out is probably some sort of licensing model eventually. And I think the litigation that's going to precede that is really a case of rights holders asserting their rights in order to establish that they have something to license. Because if you don't have any rights in the input, then you don't really have anything to license. So, but there are huge and difficult questions about what those licenses would look like, who would grant them. So, if you're an artist signed exclusively to a record label, should you be able to license the use of your voice for deepfakes outside of your contract with the label? Is that something a label wants to do? How do you price? How do you price the music that you're licensing? So, because there's the way that the technology works in many cases, there's no direct relationship between the input that was used to train the model and the output that's been created. So it's not like a Spotify license where Spotify can say, well, 10 people listen to your song, so you're going to get paid for those 10 listens. The model's just creating outputs that are in a very indirect sense trained on the input. So how does that work? And then how does the money get shared between artists and the industry? Legal topics now.
No, this is the time to talk about this stuff, because once this window closes and the laws are written, we end up with like 50 years of problems, now 100 years of problems. So it's really important that artists in the industry understand the legal framework that's being built at the moment. But you wanted to add something, Sam?
Yeah, no, I was really interested in what you're saying, Alex, and it's making me think, so we're talking about copyright with music, but how do we establish identity? And this is a role I'm playing because I have a digital avatar, a fictional character in the metaverse, and the whole Apple headset, spatial computing, where we could be going as an industry. it's like, you know, in generative AI avatars as well, like how do we establish that, you know, you're talking to a human, right? You know, in whatever sort of simulation. So it'd be interesting if we ever have like a proof of humanity, and this can connect to the music industry, like human-made or something. Like, I'm curious, what would be that authentic stamp?
There is a sort of legal answer to that, which is the EU AI Act, which is going through the kind of the process at the moment. I mean, I don't think it's going to be implemented until probably 2026 as a best guess, but one of the things they've said in that act is that users of AI technology to generate deepfakes are going to have to disclose the fact that they've done that. So whether people are, you know, whether I'm sitting in my bedroom doing that and I'm actually going to comply with those rules, I don't know, but there are efforts at the legislative level to kind of tackle that problem.
Who is part of that? You mentioned, you know, this is the time, the window before it shuts, and this is locked in for 50 years or whatever it is. Who do you know? Who's part of that conversation right now, as far as musicians, lawyers, legislators?
It's legislators at the EU level.
But who are they?
People lobby.
Yeah.
You know, there are all sorts of lobbying efforts going on the tech side and on the right-hand side. It's a kind of wide discussion. I don't know if everyone's always talking to each other, kind of not at cross purposes. It's a very broad discussion involving lots of people.
Yeah, like the fake Drake is a great example, because that, even though UMG ended up issuing takedowns for that, they don't own his voice. So Drake owns his voice, not the label. The only reason they took it down was because the person who put it up used an unauthorized sample. That was the way they got it taken down. So there isn't anything in existing music contracts that says you actually own the tone and the intonation of my voice. So that's a huge red flag and issue. How do you see that playing out in terms of like, basically, like your identity answer kind of plays into that, but how do you own legally your identity? There are some existing likeness laws, but how do you see that playing out?
That's a huge question, and I don't have the answer, but I am a proponent of being a sovereign over your data and your wealth. I mean, this is still a pie-in-the-sky idealism concept, but it's the only way I can conjure up a solution for when we're entering this territory. And besides what you're saying with the EU and all this legal stuff, I feel like there needs to be a grander solution where we have, sovereignty over all of our data. It's an opt-in sort of system. This is a bit of a segue, but I love a benefit of generative AI and even in music, because I do love the concept of a PPA, like a private personal assistant. Like talking about sovereignty, like it knows what you like, can make recommendations. Maybe it's an educational music tutor for you, but it's a private personal assistant, so it's not like Siri.
Yeah. If you're in the studio and you have a big weekend and on the road and you need to finish a remix, you can just use it to help you.
Right.
Yeah, because it's a really interesting point. We'll kind of come back to that stuff, but I think the ownership aspect in the model is interesting legally, because yes, of course, everyone knows what Drake sounds like, everyone knows what Beyonce sounds like, but if you could train an AI on Freddie Mercury, Beyonce, Drake, and 10 other artists, and the output wouldn't be as clear as you actually saying that's Drake. And how would you be able to reverse engineer a model like that from a legal perspective? There's no way of knowing how the training data was unless it was originally disclosed.
Yeah, again, the AI Act is one of the sort of recent additions was a requirement to sort of summarise your data set if you're training up a foundation model, which these would count as. But you're right, I think we're going to get into a lot of questions where rights holders have hunches, and we're trying to prove those hunches by working backwards.
It's kind of the sampling, the early days of sampling.
Yeah, well I think in a sense sampling is easier because you can isolate that through seconds and you can say that's mine. Whereas I think in many cases it's going to be very indirect with the relationship between the output and loads and trying to prove that it was, and even with the Drake example, let's say that so Drake's, so you might as Drake's label have a suspicion that technology was trained on existing Drake works, but you might only have the rights to his first album or his second album, or how are you going to, is it possible that there's some other material out there that was trained on a live performance? Maybe you get the grain of his voice from an interview. I think it's going to be quite difficult, but we have been batting back and forth internally, and we think there are various. I won't sort of get into the detail, but there are various ways that we can do that, including in the most extreme circumstance, asking the court to draw an adverse inference. So you effectively go to them and you say, look, we don't think there's any other explanation for the fact that this thing can do pretty kind of good Drake sound alikes than the fact that our work was used, that the AI company's not paying ball and disclosing that fact. So we'll let you, the court, draw your own conclusions from that. And courts and other areas of law are willing to make those leaps. That could be where it shows up.
Yeah. I want to move on to functional music. I think it's a really interesting aspect of generative AI music. There's obviously the Spotify stuff, releasing stuff. Being an artist, being an identity and owning your own IP is one side of it, but a lot of artists make music for production music, for TV, for films, for advertisements. That kind of feels like the first thing to go, because AI is best at pastiche. That's what it does by default. So if you want to create something that sounds like Calvin Harris for your BMW ad, but you don't want to pay him, you commission a production house to do it for you with a producer who's able to create that sound without paying the publishing fees. So do you see that being a huge threat to that revenue stream for existing artists right now, and what are production houses saying about that? Are they very worried, or are they training up their own models, or what's going on?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of already happening. There's musicians being paid pittance to write library tracks that sound like Calvin Harris songs. Like, okay, so that step will go one step further, but it's already pretty close. Those people choose to do that. And I've got a lot of friends who work in music libraries, and they every morning get up and they write songs that sound like, or this mood, or upbeat, or referencing artists, and they get paid a decent wage to do it. And those tracks cost next to nothing to put on your ads or to use internally. So just things artistic things like this, it's not as drastic as everyone thinks. We've been there for quite a while now.
Yeah, but I think the difference now is that those artist revenue streams won't happen, because the publishing houses can just use AI to generate what they were originally paying an artist to do. Yeah, so and artists are already struggling with streaming royalties, and yeah, it's just another thing that artists suffer from.
Yeah, I would go along with that. I think that if we're talking, I guess, about artists and original musicians who are out there trying to make it, then I think they're in a safer position than people who just choose to be library composers for a living. They're in control.
I would agree with that. Because there's tools out there like Ava that is already solving this. There's just a whole suite. I mean, I don't think it will erode this industry completely, but I do think out of all the sectors in the music industry, the functional music, like mood, landscapes, and background music will be the first thing to go. But there will still be always a need for human-made premium and for the cream of the crop, because I have tried these tools, and at the moment it's not that good. Like, just saying, it really depends on what it's used for and the function, and I think that will be reflected as well, in the pay. So, I think no industry will go, it'll just make people rethink what is quality.
Yeah. Alex, you're working with publishing houses on this, and some people who control sync libraries, essentially. Could you have some insight from the legal perspective?
Yeah, we are talking to lots of rights holders about this, and they're sort of working out a position.
Do you feel like they're panicking?
No, they're not panicking, and I think they're also mindful of the need to not be automatically knee-jerk anti. I think lessons that we learned from the sort of the early 2000s, late 90s, in terms of the kind of the very knee-jerk approach to that. So, and I think it's not necessarily the case that any one label or publisher has a single position on this. So, internally, a music publisher, for example, people who are working with commercial music might feel quite differently from people who are working with production music, library music. So, I think there's a lot of thinking about what happens. I think there is appetite to do license deals with many of the rights holders. So yeah, I think it's a fairly responsible and thoughtful approach that's been taken. I know the music industry isn't always characterised as that.
Yeah, I was going to say that. You mentioned Endo earlier, which is a good point. to move on to now. If anyone doesn't know what McNeill is basically like a generative AI app that creates soundscapes based on neurological studies around calmness, sleeping, focusing, relaxing, exercising essentially. But they've also just done a deal with UMG, which is really interesting, to use the existing UMG catalog to create a sleep version, for example, of an existing track. Not necessarily a new one, they could use the whole catalog. This is like a really interesting new opportunity for both rights holders and artists to create. Because everyone knows about Lo-Fi Girl YouTube channel and like the sleep playlist on Spotify and the white noise royalties and blah blah blah. This is kind of like a way that UMG can tackle that and say, we're just going to create like an endless or like a 15-20 minute version of a 3-minute pop song that you can rest to, you can focus to, you can exercise to. You set the time frame you want it to last for, and you set the activity. I mean, that feels like a whole new market, right? And that's quite exciting.
I read the press release of that quite carefully because it was quite interesting. And they made it very clear that it was functional music only, so music to sleep to, things like that. The other thing that they made quite clear was that all the output would be made in collaboration with artists and with artists' approval. So what this isn't is a kind of consumer-facing proposition where people can, universal artists' work has been fed into the model, and then users can just sort of generate their own output. I don't think that's what's going to be happening here. They're going to be using McNeill's technology, working with James Blake or someone like
within
that,
the label,
and he will then create his own kind of new sleep album or whatever. So that's quite a long. That's much more kind of specific and unique. We're not really talking about, as I said, kind of consumer-generated outputs.
Yeah, I mean, if your audience is humans, right, not AIs or NPCs, like companies that position themselves as artist-centric will be, I think, more the power players, obviously, in the market, not just for companies, but for the fans as well, because they know that the art's being supported. What I'm genuinely excited about is bringing the fans into the whole co-creation experience. I know you want to talk about that as well, but yeah, I'm happy to talk about that now.
Yeah, let's do it. I was going to mention the Grimes story, because Grimes is a perfect example of this, where she released her voice model, basically made it publicly available. Anyone can sound like Grimes, they put an a cappella or any other sound. And then they take 50% of the royalties of a track that she approves to be released.
Yeah.
It's like a really groundbreaking new ecosystem for AI models, and it allows fans who maybe can't even sing, can't make music, to participate in the creation process. That kind of feels like something that is going to happen, is just around the corner.
Yeah, she's just like established an entirely new model. There's other artists out there like Holly plus Herndon as well, who also is licensing her voice. But what she did, Holly, is interesting because she hasn't made public being able to do lyrics because there's no guardrails in place for what words can be said and not. So right now it's just melodies and phonetics. Because as you know, the law always takes ages to catch up with the technology. But I think there's so much fan art and fan fiction out there, and it's just not reaping any necessarily rewards besides culture. So being able to monetize culture and co-create with the community is like a whole new interactive exercise. And because I play in the realms of multimedia storytelling as well, with the Vinci project, what Grimes has done with her model has inspired me as well, with where I was already thinking about, because I've written a novel. It's a space AI opera based 500 years in the future. There's a whole cast of characters, but I basically want to activate the community that I have to become players as well in the story. And so not only could this be a music thing, but this could be like a micro storyline experience. You've got Star Wars, Mandalorian, So this is very big ambition, but this is what I'm actively building every day. And that's why I do this whole multimedia approach, which I think is a really unique angle as an artist. And I think, in this climate, of generative AI music as well, being able to stand out and differentiate yourself is a great way to approach this whole thing. And that's the approach I've taken, is the multimedia approach. And the model that Grimes did, I can totally apply when I think the legal have caught up more to doing multimedia storytelling as well with the community, as well as voice.
Yeah, I mean, creating something for your fans to engage with and be part of is a great way of adding a human aspect to your artistry beyond just generative AI in the studio. And it's a way to engage them, and then that grows your fan base more. You can do live shows, so obviously I feel like live shows are going to become, maybe you don't agree, but do you think live shows are going to become more and more important as people want to see a face behind the music, as music is being made by button pressing essentially?
Yeah, it's interesting. So my current show that I do, it's a very like multimedia interactive show. So I have all this content that I made as the Vinci avatar character by mocap. It's recorded on a major LED screen behind me. But now I'm using technologies like Move AI. You might have heard about that earlier for real-time motion capture. But what I'm really interested in is turning a passive audience that are just normal punters into active co-creators in the music experience. So what would that look like? Question mark. These are the questions that I'm currently exploring to take my show to the next level for my next gig, actually. So I'm thinking generative music or generative art at least. And, you know, because I'm in the story world, connecting it to like, you know, a musical or a storyline or a plot, like let's achieve this mission or goal, and in the audience in real time, they can interact. I don't know through what application, but combining this stack of technologies is what will position artists and be able to differentiate themselves in this climate.
I don't have a lot to add to that really, other than the fact that, yeah, as far as live performance goes, like musicians in general, I think really crave a couple of things, and it's collaboration. We for the most part, enjoy collaborating with other musicians and producers, so that there'll always be a yearning for that. And then mostly taking away the sleep stuff and the background stuff. Most musicians, performers crave an engaged audience, so that will never change. They don't, like you said, we don't. I'm not necessarily interested in passive audiences. The live show is about what can you do that you can only be witness in the room, for example, or that really does require a level of technical ability or talent as a performer. That will just become more and more valuable, which is exciting.
Yeah, I mean, have you seen a Jacob Collier live show? Is anyone a fan of Jacob Collier? I'm a fan.
Yeah.
But
he is a human AI brain.
He's literally, but he gets the audience to harmonize like a choir. Where could we take this with generative AI music and technology? Like, if their voice could produce some sort of visual output on the stage generatively in real time, I mean, maybe I'll collaborate with him.
Yeah, you should. Well, we got 5 minutes warning there, so let's get straight into the big stuff. I just want to ask each of you, and it's a pretty basic question, really. Do you think these tools can replace creativity and humanity? Because when it boils down to it, we give ourselves a lot of credit that computers will never be human, etc. But they're pretty good at mimicking patterns. And what is creativity if it's not consistent patterns based on influences? What do you think about that? I mean, is this just a fanciful sci-fi idea?
I mean, replace, again, it's a big word. I don't know. It's already replacing, but it won't, I don't think it will holistically replace what musicians do, what live artists do, what technically, classically trained performers do. But it's happening. Yeah, it's already replacing some part of the industry. That's just a fact. Kind of just accept it or reject it, but it's happening.
I think it also comes down to how do we define creativity?
Yeah.
Like what, like to its core, what is creativity? I believe it's anything intentional. Now, I don't know what that means to you, but and the realization that we are all interconnected. This is a question, can an AI be intentional, and can it realize that it's interconnected to the human experience? Or is it just a stochastic parrot or mimicking the human experience? I don't think it personally can, at least at this period of time for sure. So it will never replace humans in that aspect.
Alex, anything to add?
Not really, other than a sort of cop-out answer, which is that I think there are so many examples of technology that were intended for one thing and have found some other use. I think we're generally quite bad at predicting the future, because obviously it's predicting the future how you turn it. So I think some of the areas like production, I think there are some obvious applications where generative AI will probably unfold in a way that we're expected to. It will cannibalize certain areas of human activity.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of will there be use cases that we just can't foresee at the moment, almost certainly. And there are those cliches about, we overestimate we overestimate the impact of technology in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. I think that all of those principles will apply.
Yeah, I think drum machines were supposed to be the end of drummers, and they became electronic music, and auto-tune was supposed to be the end of singers, and it became trap and other genres. So it became a creative tool, not a replacement tool. That's probably what's going to happen here too. All good.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'd love to open it up to Q&A. You've got a question.
I've been studying the downfall of technology firms since the Bronze Age, really. And the recurring pattern of why there isn't a BlackBerry, a Nokia, or anyone like that, DEC, who presumably never heard of, or OS2, is panels rather like this, with all due respect, where the industry or the people running a company say, the thing that's good for our industry is this, and the thing that's good for this group of workers is that. And it's all about what they want to give to people and how they want to charge them for it. What sort of input do you think wants the users who can just run this stuff on their desktop computers? And the obvious example is file sharing, which caused quite a ripple back in the days. Do you fear that if these things are just led by the big music companies who employ vast numbers of people to do incomprehensibly useless things, do you think that huge infrastructure can survive once consumers can just make their own music? Even people who can't do music like me.
It's a good question.
It's a big question. I don't know if I have the answer, but like any technology, it's democratization. Like for instance, I'm not an animator, but I taught myself Unreal Game Engine because, and like, did that take a whole industry out of a job because I'm just a content creator with that. Same with music production. So it's not really like a pertinent to AI. I don't think it'll ever like erode the infrastructures of the industry in general. It would just, I don't know, it might just extra democratize it and add to this decentralization element as well with blockchain, and taking it to a whole new level. Whether that turns our attention away from old industries and hierarchies, I don't know, that's to be determined. But I don't think it'll ever, erode, human artists that are genuinely building their artists and fan base and having an emotional connection.
And just to add to that, how important is collaboration? So you've got a music group, and they have found this perfect chemistry where everyone's got something to add to them form this new identity. How important is that essentially for that remain to be important? Finding this chemistry between group members.
Can I just quickly answer your question and then come to that? I think you're right. I think and I don't think anyone is advocating this approach. I think the idea that we can sort of put our fingers in our ears, design our own reality, and ignore the user, I think is obviously a no-go. And I think the idea that we can dictate user behaviour, that can only happen to a limited extent as an industry. The horse is bolted in a sense. People are doing this, people are creating stuff themselves, people are using generative AI. I think the response from the industry is just that to the extent there's a legal framework that allows them to participate in those technologies and earn some money from the catalogues they've invested in, I think they're sort of within their rights to want to do that. But then I don't think there's a sort of, let's go and sue a Grammy in Milwaukee kind of approach that there might have been 25 years ago.
To that point as well, I think it'd be nice to see a bit more responsibility put on the user and the consumer, because there's always been laws around all kinds of things within all industries, and there's always people who try and break the laws and use whatever they are, Napster and illegal streaming services to get something for free. So we can do as much as we can to set up legal frameworks, but it would be nice to see consumers say, well, like I said, I only want to listen to music that I know has been created from scratch with organic instruments, and I'm going to find a platform or a label that does that, and I'm going to pay accordingly, knowing that costs a lot more to produce. That's the bit that excites me. Otherwise, people can break the law. People can get free music, free art. They can do it, but if you can sleep at night.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
From the copyright perspective, how does the concentration differ from whether the music was produced by a machine or a human? Because it feels like we're placing a higher bar on the machine or the AI from the copyright perspective, right? Artists have been inspiring themselves and very publicly so from others for millennia. So why can't the machine do the same?
That's a valid philosophical question. So if I am this isn't the legal answer, this is the philosophical answer. If I sit in the studio and I listen to 10 Bob Marley tracks to get inspired and I write a reggae song, the way that the law works is I'm allowed to listen to those Bob Marley songs. I just need to make sure that the thing I write at the end of that process, that writing session, doesn't copy in any substantial way the 10 Bob Marley songs I listen to. Why shouldn't an AI piece of technology be able to effectively do the same thing? It's a valid question, and I think the government was at one point thinking of bringing in a copyright exception to effectively allow exactly that. They've wrote that back. I'm not a philosopher, I don't think it's that one. But you're right, the law is treating ingestion by technology differently to how we treat a kind of a musician in the studio just getting inspired.
I love that question, because it comes back to what I was saying earlier, what is creativity? Like, that's a whole philosophical question in itself. So I think it's like input and output. So it's like, as a human input creatively, we are all inspired by everything. But the output is it has to be, well, how do you define originality? But obviously, as Alex was saying, it can't be like too close to anything. It has to, if you put it next to something, it has to be uniquely differentiated from that. It's almost the same with AI. It's like another different, an artificial neural network this time, not like a quantum or whatever we have as a human. But it's the same principle. But then, these are the questions like you that I'm grappling with, because how do we define creativity? But it's input and output.
So just very quickly on that. I think the difference is when you listen to about 10 Bob Marley tracks, you're not just bringing those tracks to the game, you're bringing your nuance and taste, and you're bringing a lot of your life story to that creative process that isn't part of the AI's training model. Your mood, how hungry you are, how much sleep you had the night before, if you got to rush out of the studio because of a deadline, whatever. All these things are subconsciously happening during the creative process, and that's why it's different.
Will there not be before this question, will there not be that ability though? Does anyone know the answer to that? Because it comes down to intent, doesn't it? So, using the Marvin Gaye third lines doesn't get away with it. Ed Sheeran does get away with it. I think, as far as I can see, the only real difference was that Robin Thicke admitted to saying we're going for a Marvin Gaye vibe. So that's what excites me, because if we have this technology, we should be almost like a blockchain. Someone saw, well, you said write me a song in the style of Jay-Z instead of write me a song in the style of 90s hip hop. So those, it's intent. Like if you're actively going out and saying we tried to copy this artist, as opposed to we tried to create a sound of Motown or whatever it is.
It's like manslaughter and murder. Like,
oh, Jesus!
But he's like,
no,
but like, do you have a conscience?
Yeah.
Does AI have a conscience? Is it consciously copying and copywriting, this material? I mean, these are questions that are philosophical.
And one last question.
Hi, I'm Sasha. I used to be head of AI at Music Tribe. We speak about AI in very generic terms, but there are degrees on AI. At one end of the spectrum, you have those models like Google's Music LM or Facebook trying to generate a fully fleshed track. At the other end, you have fully human-generated music, and then somewhere in the middle, you have musicians using AI to generate a melody and all that. So the question is, do we have a way to measure the amount of human agency or the human of AI, or the amount of AI that makes a track an AI track versus a human track? And do we have also a way to measure the correlation with the quality of the output of that? Because back to your thing about we should pay what it costs, well, we should also pay according to the quality of the results. So from your experience, is probably more Samantha than as a musician than the other ones, but do we have a way to measure the amount of AI, and do we have a way to correlate that with quality of the music?
Yeah, I mean, from a streaming platform perspective, just what's happening in the industry currently, like Deezer has technology that can identify if it was like an AI made and then automatically take it off the platform.
They said they do, but they haven't really said that works.
Right, yeah, so great question, don't have the answer, but the industry is actively trying to respond
That's
to
the
this.
perfect solution, isn't it, really? Some sort of technology that can quantify and measure how much human involvement there was.
It's just such a, but how do you...
I have no idea. No idea. Someone else. AI
Fun
will figure it
times
out.
ahead.
AI will figure it out.
But in some cases, you will have a prompt, so you will have there will be something you can point to say, well, they just said write me some music, and the AI created some music. So that's the most minimal possible human input, I guess. And then there's sort of sliding scale, as you say, in terms of how the different technologies work, because there are much more kind of everyone's it's very press-worthy is the sort of fake Drake type kind of deep fake examples, but there are going to be much more kind of modest examples of AI being used much more as a sort of tool and less as actually sort of generating the output in a kind of total sense.
it's also like where we create the music. So like I create music indoors, like Ableton Live. So like I don't know where Ableton is going as a company, but it'll be interesting if they integrate, I don't know, blockchain, or how do they authenticate, like what is generative versus what is human input. And that's the same with samples as well, with blockchain technology and the industry responding to that. So I think in the future, they'll probably partner with the doors out there, like Pro Tools, Ableton, all that, wherever you make the music, if it's in those applications, to basically just automate that process so it's authenticated.
Great answer. Thank you so much to our panelists. Breaking for lunch, and we'll see you back here in an hour.
Yeah. But yeah, you've got your little... Sweet. Nicole, we'll see you.